Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about something really interesting, the power of stories. How is it that the story we tell about something can become more real, more powerful than what actually happened? It's a wild idea, and it leads to a really fascinating puzzle.
So here's the puzzle we're digging into today. How can a movement be called a success if it completely failed to achieve its main goal? It sounds impossible, right? We're going to use the Stop Cop City movement in Atlanta as our case study here. A lot of people, especially in academic and activist circles, call it a huge success, a real inspiration. But when you look at the facts on the ground, well, they seem to tell a completely different story. And yeah, look at this. It really lays out the contradiction in black and white. You've got the narrative over here, which says this was an abolitionist success and the state failed, but then you look at the reality. The Cop City facility, it was built. It's open right now. The state's repression, it kind of worked. A forest is gone, and an activist was killed. So, how on earth do you square these two things? How can both be true at the same time?
All right, let's dive into this paradox. A success that failed? How does a story of total victory get told about what, objectively looks like a defeat? Well, the sources we're looking at say the answer isn't about the facts at all. It's about feelings.
And there it is. That's the first huge clue. The argument here is that the truth of this whole success story has nothing to do with material facts, like whether or not a building got built. No, it's all about emotional resonance. It's about how this story makes you feel.
Okay, so if it's all about feelings, that brings us to a really key concept from the source material. It's called the affective dialectic. Just think of it as the engine, the machine that builds these super powerful stories that don't really need to be connected to the facts.
So what the heck is an affective dialectic? Basically, it's a way of judging a story's truth based on its emotional journey, not on what actually happened. So, if a story takes you from a really bad feeling to a really good one, if it has that satisfying emotional arc, then in this way of thinking, it is a success. It doesn't matter what the facts on the ground say. And check this out. This shows exactly how it works. The Stop Cop City story is a masterclass in this. It takes all these negative feelings, what the source calls death feelings, and flips them into positive life feelings. So the rage you feel seeing burnt trucks, that gets reframed as creativity when activists turn them into garden beds. The awful feeling of deprivation in jail, that's transformed into the warmth of sharing food with each other. Even the isolation of getting arrested becomes a story about community, about jail moms forming these new, powerful bonds.
So you see the pattern here, right? The story is a success because it hits all the right emotional notes. It feels like the kind of resistance story we expect to hear. Overcoming the odds, finding light in the darkness. And in this whole process, the feeling literally becomes the fact.
Okay, so that's the what. But how? How are these stories actually built? What are the tools in the toolbox for creating a narrative so powerful it can just overwrite reality? Well, let's get into it. We're going to look at the language that makes all this possible. So the source material points to two big ways our language today kind of floats free from reality. First, there's what it calls dead English. This is that corporate institutional jargon. It's passive, it's vague, nobody's actually doing anything. Steps have been taken. Who took them? We don't know. It's all about dodging responsibility. Then, on the other side, you've got meme grammar. This is the language of the internet. It's all style, all performance. Think about the phrase, "it's giving." You're not actually connecting with something, you're just performing a certain reaction using a borrowed style. And in both of these, language is being used to talk about stuff without really being accountable to it.
And where does a lot of this meme grammar get its energy? The source has a name for it: linguistic extraction. This is the process of taking grammatical forms, slang, and style from specific communities. The source points to African American vernacular English as a key example, and then circulating them online as just a cool aesthetic, totally disconnected from their original context. All the flavor is extracted, but the history, the community, the meaning, that all gets left behind.
Okay, so these language tools are part of a bigger process that the source calls narrative capture. It's basically a four-step recipe for replacing reality with a story. Step 1, a real-world event happens. It's always messy, complicated. Step 2, someone analyzes that event, usually through a lens they already have. Step 3, they format that analysis into a simple, clean, emotionally satisfying story. And finally, step 4, that clean story gets shared around until it basically replaces the memory of what actually happened.
And what's the end result of all this? 1. A single story.
All that messy, complicated reality gets boiled down to just one version of events. It becomes the story. And once that happens, it's almost impossible to see everything that got left out, everything that got smoothed over to make the story so neat and tidy.
So all of this, it brings us to the final and honestly the most challenging idea from the sources. It's this. What if the very thing we ask for a movement to make sense, to be easily explained, to be legible, what if that demand is actually a trap?
To really get this idea of a legibility trap, we have to look at a little bit of history. It's a fascinating story involving the Italian thinker Antonio Gramsci and the FBI's COINTELPRO program. The argument is kind of mind-blowing. The theory that activists started using to organize the resistance was a theory the government had already figured out how to beat.
Just look at this timeline. It lays it all out. Back in the 20s and 30s, Gramsci is writing about how the biggest threat to the state is what he calls organic intellectuals, leaders who come up naturally from within a movement. Fast forward to the 50s, 60s, 70s, what's the FBI's COINTELPRO program doing? It's actively targeting and taking down those exact kinds of leaders in groups like the Black Panther Party. And then, and this is the kicker, only in 1971, after the state had already crushed that threat, do Gramsci's big ideas finally get translated into English and become popular with American activists. The theory arrived too late.
So what happened? What was the consequence of this? Well, you had this theory that was meant for full-on insurgency, but it shows up after the fight's been lost. So it gets repurposed. It becomes a tool to make movements legible, to explain them to universities, to funders, to institutions. And the irony is just huge. It went from being a tool to fuel resistance to a tool to format resistance into nice, clean stories. It created the perfect environment for that narrative capture thing we were just talking about.
And this quote from the source material just says it all, doesn't it? If they let you teach it, it's already too late. Wow. The idea is that the second a theory of resistance is safe enough to be on a college syllabus or in a grant application, its real teeth, its real power to cause change, it's probably already gone. The fact that it's so easy to understand is a sign that it's no longer a threat. So that leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, right? When we package up these messy, complicated events into these neat, satisfying stories, what are we actually doing? Are we making sense of the world? Or are we kind of trapping it? Are we just replacing a difficult reality with a simple story because it feels better? I'll leave you with that. Thanks so much for watching.